This is Adelaide's Great Wall of China, a high cement wall topped off with security cameras and patrolled by security guards right in the middle of suburban Adelaide. Now, it's a Chinese consulate here to look after Chinese students, Chinese tourists, perhaps help people from China do business deals in Adelaide. It's a pretty big operation for Adelaide, which is why a lot of people are suspicious it's actually a base for spying operations. In fact, experts tell us it's almost certain that there are spying operations here looking at South Australian defence industries, research and development, the submarine project. It's one of the reasons why the people here in this leafy suburb, middle-class suburb in the eastern suburbs of Adelaide, are pretty concerned about this. They don't like the size of the compound, they don't like the security. Some of them have complained about drones flying in the area. Yet despite this, and despite the fact that China is currently imposing economic sanctions on Australia, the Liberal Premier of South Australia, Stephen Marshall, is going to speak here later this month at the official opening of the consulate. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place, isn't he? He's stuck between a heavily fortified consulate and suburban Adelaide because, as we all know, China is our greatest trading partner. It's also our greatest security threat. Let's cross now to Liberal Senator for South Australia, Alex Antic. Thanks for joining us, Alex. So first up, should the whole nation, let alone South Australians, be concerned about this consulate compound in the suburb of Joslin in Adelaide?
Well, thanks, Chris, and welcome home. Look, I think there's enough to go on here to say the answer is probably yes. This is, as you described, an enormous installation. It's been described as a fortress, and it's probably not far off that, to be frank. It's right in the middle of a suburb called Joslin, which is a leafy eastern suburbs address. High property values, and it's a big site. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about 5 houses, 2 certificates of title, but it's about 5 houses worth right in the middle of a residential area. This was sold back from the SA Health Department back under the Labor government back in 2017. But it's a big project, and there are a couple of things that probably are most troublesome about it. First of all, the size. You've already described that in your intro. We believe that there are 11 or 12 consular staff there, foreign nationals. Now, to put that in perspective, South Australia, small state, 1.7 million people, and sure, agricultural and trade relations are very, very important, but every other country that we trade with seems to have smaller footprints. Greece and Italy are the only other 2 nations, I think, that have consular staff here, and they have about 2 each. So you really do have to wonder why it is there are so many. And the residents, quite rightly, are concerned. And I think there's reason to be concerned. We don't know what's going on there, but we know that 10 kilometres down the road, we have some of the biggest defence projects this country has ever seen, $90 billion worth of submarine and frigate projects. You know, you have to start asking the questions, and that's why I've done that. I've written to the Foreign Minister about it, about the size, the footprint, and some of the behaviour as well.
Yeah, well, of course, when it comes to the planning approvals and the like, some of the locals are worried about that. The local council says it has no control because the diplomatic arrangements mean that can effectively scoot past those council controls. I think the real issue here is what they're up to and the spying. Now, we all know countries spy. We know Australia gets involved in spying. Of course, China spies. But I don't know whether setting up such a large base in the Adelaide suburbs, it kind of gives the game away, doesn't it? As you say, when you compare those numbers of staff, very few foreign students, Chinese students or tourists in Adelaide at the moment, for instance, i.e. none.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, we've got to be real about this. This is ultimately a country that we've had fractious relationships with of late. We've had a country that's threatened our trade arrangements. And South Australia is the home of wine, I would argue, in this country, and also one of the very big hubs of student populations, both of which have taken a bit of a belting as a result of some of the behaviour of the Chinese Communist Party. It is very large. There aren't much by way of students floating around at the moment, and what we have to say out of this is, what does this mean for the locals? I mean, what does it mean for them to have this installation, security cameras pointing into their backyards sometimes, and frankly, given the nature of some of the angst, the understandable angst of the local Uyghur population, of which South Australia has the highest in the country, we're likely to see protests there as well. So, you know, you do have to wonder about this. And I think, I mean, certainly these are some of the issues that I've raised with the Foreign Minister. We've seen some pretty extraordinary reports of behaviour, from the strange to the downright unneighbourly. You know, this is Australia. We don't treat our neighbours like that, and I think it is something that we have to look into.
Well, we were certainly approached by a security guard just for standing around and filming out the front of the place today. Now, given all these concerns, is Liberal Premier of South Australia, Stephen Marshall, doing the right thing, agreeing to speak at the official opening of this compound later this month?
Reality is that South Australian exporters, both service and commodity exporters, have a very large market in China. We've had good relations from South Australia with emerging opportunities for those products, and we'll continue to pursue every single opportunity that we can. We've got a good working relationship with the Consulate here in South Australia. They provide us with opportunities to sell into probably one of the largest emerging markets in the world.
There's Stephen Marshall talking about that today, defending the trade interests here. But I ask you, Alex Antic, is he doing the right thing by going along to the official opening here in 11 days' time?
Well, look, I think it places him in what can be described as an invidious position. There are all of the trade arguments to be weighed up. But we have to be real about this. This is a country that has a very, very big human rights cloud hanging over its head at the moment. They are under a cloud for the treatment of the Uyghur people, the mass detention, sterilisation, all of these things. That's one element. The second one is simply the fact that we do have this fractious relationship at the moment. This is a country that has recently threatened our trade requirements. Now, this is a matter for the Premier, and I'm certainly not telling him what to do in his own electorate, but if it were me, I absolutely wouldn't.
Well, if it was you, you wouldn't do it. So, in other words, you're suggesting the Premier shouldn't speak at this event?
I think it'd be the sort of event which could quite comfortably be let go through to the keeper. I certainly wouldn't be if I were him.
Yeah, fascinating. Do you think he's got time to rethink it? And do you think perhaps he should take advice from the Foreign Minister?
Look, all of those things are a matter for him. I don't seek to tell him what to do. I mean, if I was in his position, I'd probably take a different approach. But look, I think it is a very, very complicated area. But we have seen through the actions of the Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister what standing up to this communist dictatorship does. Trade's actually through the roof with China at the moment. We have to call their bluff. This wolf warrior diplomacy has no place in this country or this state. So I think a line needs to be drawn in the sand, personally.